The heat of Nairobi clung to me like a second skin as I peeled off my gloves and scrubbed my hands for the third time that day. The clinic was quiet now. Our last patient, a malnourished infant with a cleft palate, had just been prepped for transfer. I leaned against the concrete wall, opened my phone, and saw an email from my sister. Subject: Dad's will was handled. Estates taken care of. Body, everything's done. Don't worry about it. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, not even a signature. I stared at the screen, my heart kicking up. Something felt off. Dad had passed away just 3 weeks ago. I hadn't even had time to grieve properly from here, let alone discuss the estate. I'd called Leah after the funeral. She didn't pick up. I figured she needed space. But now she was making decisions alone. My fingers trembled as I tapped my contacts. Thomas Avery, I whispered, pressing the call icon for our family lawyer. He'd known Dad for 2 decades, handled Mom's affairs, helped with our college funds, even advised Dad when he got sick last year. He picked up on the second ring. Julia. I'm surprised to hear from you, he said. I got Leah's email, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She said the will was martialed. There was a long pause. Julia, I assumed you knew. Everything was finalized last week. The property savings, even Richard's antiques, everything was transferred to Leah's name. What? That can't be right, I said. Dad and I talked before I left. He said the estate would be split. He promised. Thomas sounded genuinely confused. The updated will listed Leah as the sole beneficiary. Signed and notarized. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Updated will. Yes. Dated about 6 months ago. Leah brought your father to my office. She said you were abroad indefinitely and had agreed to step away from inheritance responsibilities. I never said that, I snapped. I was on a 1-year fellowship. I never even spoke to you about this silence again. I need to see a copy, I added firmly. All of it, every page. Thomas cleared his throat. I'll send you a digital copy by the end of the day. When the call ended, I just stood there, staring at the dusty tiles beneath my feet. My colleagues walked past, joking about lunch, but I couldn't hear them. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped my heart out and left the space echoing. I didn't care about the money, I really didn't. But the house. The antiques Dad and I restored together. The study where he taught me chess. It wasn't just property, it was us. The life we shared, the bond we built. And Leah, my little sister. I raised her after Mom died. I gave up college parties to babysit. I stayed up late to help with her homework. When Dad got sick, I flew back every chance I got. She said hospitals made her nauseous. I never blamed her. I never thought she'd repay me like this. That night, I sat under the ceiling fan in our Nairobi compound, scrolling through old photos of Dad, wondering how long Leah had been planning this. And that's when I saw the last text Dad ever sent me. Whatever happens, know I always meant for both of you to share everything. My jaw clenched. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what. The walls of my childhood home were painted in soft sage green, and I still remembered the way they smelled like old books and lemon oil. That house had always been a sanctuary, even after Mom passed. I was 14 then. Leah was just 9. Dad buried his grief in work, lecturing at the university and hosting late-night book clubs. So I stepped in where I was needed, packing lunches, checking Leah's homework, braiding her hair before school. I wasn't her mother, but I filled that space the best I could, and she clung to me back then. Whenever thunder rolled through our quiet Pennsylvania neighborhood, she'd crawl into my bed and whisper, "Don't leave me, Jules." I never did. Not for a second. Even as we grew up, we stayed close. When I got into school, Leah helped design flashcards for my anatomy class. When she launched her freelance graphic design business, I paid for her first laptop. Dad always said we were 2 sides of the same coin, heart and mind. So when he was diagnosed with colon cancer, it didn't even occur to me to stay in Seattle, where I'd just landed a new residency. I flew home that night. Leah met me at the airport in tears, and for a moment, It felt like we were kids again, scared, clinging to each other, needing something solid. She moved back into the house, said she'd help from afar, ordering groceries, managing bills. But hospitals? She couldn't handle them. Too sterile, too overwhelming. I didn't question it. I just did what needed to be done. Every holiday, every break, I made it a point to be there for Dad, administering meds, reading him poetry when he couldn't sleep. Cleaning up after chemo made him too weak to move. Leah visited when she could once every month or so, sometimes less. We never argued, never even discussed the estate. It was understood. Equal split, no surprises. Just like Mom's jewelry years ago, we divided it piece by piece, hand in hand, no resentment. That's what sisters did. So when I read the will, the so-called updated version that named her the sole heir, I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt violated, like someone had rewritten the story of our lives and erased me from the page. Dad would never have done this willingly. He wasn't perfect, but he was fair, thorough. I remembered him muttering about legacy during our last call together, telling me, "I just want both of you to feel cared for." I believed him. I still do. But somehow Leah had changed the ending. I dug into old emails, bank statements. I even called a former caregiver named Lorraine who'd helped during Dad's final weeks. She told me Leah barely showed up, only came by when the notary was scheduled, said something about getting it done before Julia gets back. And that's when the picture began to shift from sibling trust to calculated maneuver. Still, some part of me wanted to believe there was a mistake, a misunderstanding, that maybe Leah had panicked or the lawyer had filed something wrong. Anything but what it felt like deliberate betrayal. I called Leah. For the first time in months, she didn't answer. I texted, "We need to talk about the will. This doesn't make sense." No reply. That night, I opened my laptop and reread the documents Thomas had sent. I wasn't a lawyer, but I understood enough to know where to look. And buried deep in legal language between clauses about probate and property assignments was something odd. One sentence, one clause, circled faintly in Dad's handwriting. I leaned closer, heart racing, and what I saw made me sit upright. The sentence was buried in legalese, tucked beneath paragraphs of asset descriptions and signatures. But it was there, clear as day, in Dad's familiar pen: "No heir may unilaterally claim the estate without full consent of the other. Otherwise, the estate is subject to arbitration under Clause 17B. Clause 17B. I didn't know what it meant yet, but that line, it wasn't just a technicality. It was a warning, a boundary, a silent safeguard. And Leah, she'd crossed it. I copied the entire document to my drive and started cross-referencing it against Dad's previous will, the one drafted 5 years ago before he ever got sick. They were nearly identical in structure except for two key changes. One, Leah was now the sole heir. Two, that little clause had been added quietly but deliberately, and suddenly everything made sense. Leah had brought him to the notary 6 months before he passed, right after I left for Nairobi. According to Thomas's log, she told him I was extending my fellowship indefinitely and unlikely to return. She also claimed she was Dad's only caregiver, which was a lie. I had dozens of emails, time-stamped messages, flight receipts, clear proof that I had been present for every major doctor's appointment. Leah, on the other hand, sent gift baskets and thinking of you texts, but she knew I was far away. She knew I'd be distracted, buried in fieldwork, likely unreachable for stretches of time. And she used that distance like a weapon. I emailed Thomas immediately. "Please clarify Clause 17B. Was this included in the final notarized will?" He replied within the hour. "Yes, it was added by your father. To be honest, it was an unusual clause, but he insisted. Said he wanted to ensure fairness no matter what." I closed my eyes. That sounded like him. Dad had always been cautious, almost obsessively so. When Mom died, he triple-checked the insurance paperwork. When we were kids, he made us memorize emergency numbers in 3 languages. And in his final months, he must have known something wasn't right. He couldn't stop Leah from going behind my back, but he'd left a tripwire. I called Michael Dorsey, an old friend from med school who had since become a probate attorney in Boston. We hadn't spoken in years, but he picked up immediately when I told him what was going on. Julia, if the clause is real and it's in the notarized, will you have grounds to contest? Especially if there's proof you weren't notified or that the notary was misled. I forwarded him everything. He whistled through his teeth. This is more than just messy. This could be invalid. It was strange. A part of me felt relief. Another part felt sick. I didn't want to sue my sister. I didn't want a courtroom battle. I just wanted the truth. I wanted to believe our relationship could be salvaged, that she'd been pressured or confused or desperate. But desperation doesn't rewrite legal documents. It doesn't erase someone's name from their own history. Michael got to work immediately. He filed a formal challenge to the probate decision citing Clause 17B, fraudulent representation and breach of estate terms. Within days, we received a response from the court. The entire estate was being frozen pending review. Leah still hadn't responded to me. Not a call, not a text. But 3 nights later, while I was writing notes under a kerosene lamp, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no name. I picked up. Julia. It was Leah. Her voice cracked. "What the hell did you do, Leah?" I said quietly, barely above a whisper. My pulse surged. I did what Dad would have wanted. I challenged the will because it wasn't right. "You froze the estate," she hissed. "I can't access anything, not the accounts, not the house. You blindsided me." I stood up from my desk, pacing the cracked tile floor of the clinic's back office. "You signed papers behind my back, lied to the lawyer, claimed I wasn't coming home." "I didn't lie," she snapped, but the way her voice quivered betrayed her. "I just assumed. You were gone. Dad was dying. Someone had to make decisions." "You assumed I wouldn't come back," I said, "so you cut me out." There was silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up. "I was scared," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Everything was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. Dad was slipping away and you were halfway across the world. That doesn't justify what you did." I could hear her breathing. Shallow, erratic. "Do you think this is easy for me? Do you know what people are saying now?" "You mean since the court issued the freeze?" "No," she spat. "Since your lawyer made sure every document had my name plastered across it. People think I stole from my own family." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Leah, you did." She didn't respond. I could almost feel the heat of her shame bleeding through the phone. "I found Dad's handwritten clause," I continued. "Clause 17B. It was there for a reason. He didn't trust the situation, and he was right." "You think you're so noble, don't you?" she said suddenly bitterly. "Flying off to save the world, doing surgeries in dusty tents. Meanwhile, I was here trying to hold everything together." I flinched. "Hold everything together you barely visited," because I couldn't, she cried. "I couldn't watch him die like that, but I paid the bills, I managed the house, I was here for the notary appointment," I shot back. "That's when you made time." And then her voice changed cold, tight, almost rehearsed. "You'll regret this. You've made me look like a thief." "You did that yourself," I said calmly, "and I'm not backing down." After she hung up, my hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. Leah hadn't made a panicked mistake. She had plotted this. Maybe not with malice at first, but with intent. And she had underestimated me. Thought distance meant detachment. That being a doctor in another country made me too busy to care. But she forgot that I don't give up on family, not when they're sick, not when they're dying, and not when someone tries to rewrite their legacy. Michael called the next morning with an update. "We've got a hearing scheduled. The court wants to examine the validity of the revised will and the claim that you were excluded unlawfully." "Will Clause 17B hold up?" I asked. "Emo, with the handwritten note, emails from your dad, and the proof that you were in regular contact." "Absolutely. It's ironclad. We submitted everything, call logs, my travel receipts, even old birthday cards from Dad that included lines like, Everything will be yours and Leah's 50-50. And then Leah made her next move. She hired a PR firm. A video popped up on my Facebook feed 2 days later. Leah, teary-eyed, sitting on the front steps of our family home, talking about how hard it was to lose Dad, how she only wanted to honor his wishes, and how her sister was suing her for grieving the wrong way. It was shameless, but I had something stronger than spin. I had the truth. The video had been shared over 4,000 times in the first 24 hours. Comments poured in beneath it, sympathetic emojis, stay strong messages, even a few veiled jabs at me. Strangers who knew nothing about our family called me greedy, cold, heartless. One woman wrote, "Can't believe her own sister is dragging her to court over a house. Some people will do anything for money." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a screenshot and sent it to Michael. He replied with a single sentence. "The court doesn't run on Facebook sympathy." Still, it stung. Leah's performance was good, too good. She looked small, sorrowful, tragically overwhelmed. She spoke just enough about our father's final wishes to seem righteous, but never specific enough to mention the will or Clause 17b. It was manipulation wrapped in grief. And yet I couldn't bring myself to respond publicly. I wasn't going to drag Dad's memory through the mud for likes and retweets. The only arena I cared about was the courtroom, but that didn't mean I was letting her win. I printed every document again, organized the timeline, highlighted contradictions in Leah's statements. Michael had already subpoenaed the notary who processed the will. He was prepared to argue that Leah had knowingly misrepresented the truth, and under Pennsylvania law, that was enough to void the revised document entirely. Meanwhile, Leah escalated. She started sending me texts again, some pleading, some venomous. "Leah, please, Jules, let's settle this between us. I'll give you the antiques, okay? You always like them more. Me. This isn't about antiques." Leah, fine. Take the damn house too. Just drop the court filing. Leah, 2 hours later. You think this makes you noble. You're destroying our family. That one almost made me laugh. She'd already done that. I was just pulling back the curtain. Then came the voicemail. I was walking out of the OR after assisting a local surgeon with a pediatric bowel obstruction when I saw it. Leah 113 Min, I stood under the shade of an acacia tree and listened. "Julia, I don't know what's left anymore. Dad's gone. You're out there playing savior. And I'm here alone. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought maybe I finally deserved something for once. You were always the good one, the perfect one. Maybe I wanted to matter too." There was a pause. And then softly, I didn't read everything. I didn't understand what I was signing. I just wanted it to be over. There it was. The confession, not malicious intent perhaps, but willful ignorance. And that was enough. I saved the voicemail, sent it to Michael. He called me almost immediately. "This seals it." She admitted she didn't read the document fully and that she was acting out of entitlement, not Dad's actual wishes. "We'll submit it as supporting evidence." A week later, we stood before the probate judge. Leah wore a somber gray dress, her makeup flawless, her PR consultant seated in the gallery. I wore my hospital ID around my neck, a quiet reminder of who I was and why I fought. Michael laid out the timeline, the claw, the emails, the call logs. Then he played the voicemail. Leah looked like she might cry, but this time there was no camera. The judge leaned forward. "I'll issue a ruling within the week," she said. As we left the courthouse, Leah brushed past me in the hallway. Her eyes locked with mine, equal parts fury and fear. "You should have just let it go," she said under her breath. But I didn't flinch. Dad didn't raise me to walk away from what's right. The judgment came on a Thursday. I was assisting with post-op rounds in the pediatric ward when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I glanced at the notification, an email from Michael with the subject line, "Decision issued. We won." I excused myself to the outdoor corridor, heart pounding, and opened the file. The court's language was blunt and unforgiving. The court finds that Ms. Leah Carter willfully excluded the co-heir Ms. Julia Carter under false pretenses and misrepresentation. Clause in question 7 using clearly included to prevent such actions. The will is hereby voided. Estate assets will be distributed equally in accordance with the prior legal intent and documentation. Furthermore, Ms. Leah Carter is ordered to relinquish control of all estate-related accounts and assets, effective immediately. Her role as temporary estate executor is revoked. I stared at the screen, trying to process the wave of vindication and grief. Dad's wishes were honored. The truth had been seen, justice was done, but it still felt like loss. Michael called me 5 minutes later. "You okay?" he asked. "I should be celebrating," I replied. "But it doesn't feel like a victory, not really." "That's because you didn't want revenge. You wanted fairness." He was right. I never wanted a fight. I just couldn't stay silent while someone rewrote history. The court gave Leah 72 hours to comply. She had to transfer access to all bank accounts, hand over the title to the house, and return Dad's antique collection to a secure location until the formal split could be arranged. And she did. Quietly. No fanfare. No social media post. No apology. I watched from abroad as movers cleared her things out of the house we grew up in, the house she tried to claim alone. I had our cousin Peter check in on the property. He said Leah didn't say a word as she left, just walked out with 2 suitcases and her phone. The story broke in the local press a few days later, not because of me, because of the court records. A small-town paper picked it up, then a few blogs ran with it. Inheritance fraud case ends in reversal, judge sides with overseas heir. The public sympathy she'd curated online evaporated. Fast. People reposted clips from her teary video with new captions. Turns out the sister wasn't the villain after all. She played the victim and lost everything. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. But I saved one comment that stood out: funny, how justice looks boring until the receipts show up. When I finally flew back home, it wasn't for legal meetings or bank appointments. It was to walk through the garden Dad used to tend, the one behind the kitchen where he planted lavender and wild mint. I stood there with my suitcase still in hand, listening to the wind rustle through dried branches. The house was mine now, half of it anyway, but Leah hadn't asked for her share, not yet, not even a message. It was like she'd vanished. Still, I had her voice saved in a voicemail. The one where she said she didn't read the will. The one where she admitted she just wanted to feel like she mattered. I almost deleted it, almost, but I didn't. Because some wounds don't need to be reopened, but they shouldn't be forgotten either. Justice had come, quietly, without fury or spectacle. And now it was time for something else. Peace. The air back home smelled different. It wasn't just the seasons shifting, it was something in me. Something settled. Something freed. I stood barefoot on the back porch of our family home, a mug of herbal tea cradled in my hands, staring out at Dad's old garden. The lavender bushes had overgrown, tangled with wild dandelions. The mint patch had crept past its borders, unruly and stubborn. I smiled. He would have called it beautiful chaos. After weeks of legal closure, the estate was officially divided. Half the funds were wired to my account. The deed to the house bore my name. And the antiques, carefully cataloged, sat in climate-controlled storage, waiting for decisions I hadn't rushed to make. I could have kept everything. I had every right to. But that's not who I am. I sold part of the estate land we never used, accounts we didn't need. Then I donated a portion of the proceeds to Doctors Without Borders, the organization Dad had quietly supported for years. It felt right. He once told me, "Real legacy isn't what you keep. It's what you pass on." The rest I kept simple. I kept the house. I kept Dad's handwritten journals. I kept the antique chessboard we used every Sunday. And I kept the letter he'd left in his nightstand, one I hadn't read until after the court ruling. If you're reading this, Jules, it means something went wrong. Maybe you and Leah aren't seeing eye to eye. I hope that's not the case. But if it is, know that I trust you to do what's fair, what's right. I've always been proud of you, not just for your work, but for your heart. Don't lose it. I read that letter a dozen times. The morning I reopened the house, Leah showed up. She didn't text, didn't call, just stood at the gate looking smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were swollen. She held a plain envelope in her hand. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I stepped aside, letting her through the gate. We sat on the porch 2 feet apart, the silence between us thick with years of unspoken things. "I didn't know who I was without you," she said after a while. "You always had a plan, a purpose. I just floated." "You didn't have to fight me for a place," I said. "You already had one." She nodded, staring down at the envelope. "These are my rights to the antiques. You can keep them. I don't want a cent. I just wanted to feel like I mattered to Dad, too." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "You did matter, Leah. You still do. But trust? It's not automatic. It's built." Her shoulders shook, but she didn't cry. "I'm not ready to be sisters again," I added gently. "But maybe someday." She nodded, stood, walked down the path without asking for anything else. And that was the last I saw of her for a long time. I spent the next months rebuilding not the house, but myself. I took a sabbatical from work, painted the porch, replanted the mint. I started writing just for me, little stories and memories and lessons I didn't want to lose. I wasn't the same woman who left for Nairobi a year ago. That woman believed family always chose love. The woman standing here now knows better. Family doesn't choose love. We choose truth. And truth, unlike inheritance, can't be stolen. As the sun dipped behind the hills, I pulled out Dad's old journal and started to read, this time slowly, line by line, every word. Because now I read everything.